TFA fam, welcome back in. It is week 15, which means for the majority of you, it is the first week of the fantasy playoffs. So if you are watching, first off, congrats. Second, Kev, there's no time to waste, man. We got to get these lineups set. We got to help the folks out with these running back rankings, which is what we're going to be talking about today, going through our top 24 running backs for week 15. So just dive right into it. Leading things off at RB1 for us, no surprise here, is going to be Christian McCaffrey, followed by Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, Kyron Williams, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Rashad White, Alvin Kamara, Zach Moss, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, and Brees Hall wrapping things up for us at RB12. Kev, out of these RB1s, who do the folks need to know about for week 15?
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to talk about Saquon Barkley to start off because despite losing Daniel
Yeah.
Jones, Saquon Barkley has really started to kind of really turn things on recently. Over the last 4 weeks, Saquon is averaging 20.1 PPR points per game. He's also ranks 5th in explosive run rate, 14th in yards after contact per attempt, and 19th in missed tackle force. He's also handling 74% of the team's rush attempts with a 19% target share. And really, Tommy DeVito is out here just rolling folks. I mean, he's actually looked pretty good. I mean, we kind of joked at when he first kind of took over. But he's actually played pretty well. So kind of fun little story there in the season. But this week they do take on a Saints defense. Now, typically you look at the Saints defense and think this is a tough matchup. But over the last 4 weeks, the Saints have been absolutely dreadful against the run. They have allowed the league high 191 yards rushing per game. They've also allowed the 13th highest explosive run rate. And they're 23rd in stuff rate and third in yards after contact per attempt. So Saquon is in a smash spot, is an easy top 5 pick and one that you're not really worried about any sort of game script issues or anything like that. But he's also heavily involved in the passing game anyway. So Saquon Barkley is in an incredible spot this week. Next up, let's talk about Kyron Williams. Since returning from injury, Kyron has picked up pretty much right where he left off. He's handling an elite workload, seeing 83% of the rush attempts and 75% of the routes. He's also ninth in yards created per touch and eighth in yards per touch as well, which is what has made him the RB2 in fantasy points per game. This week, the Commanders coming to town. They have allowed a 4.4 yards per carry, which is the 13th highest rate in the league over the last 4 games, to go along with the 4th highest touchdown rate this season. So this is a really good spot once again for Kyron Williams. David Montgomery. The Lions running backs have been pretty predictable. When they lead, Monty sees 61% of the snaps, 60% of the rush attempts, and games they are trailing. Gibbs is being more involved, playing 68% of the snaps and 63% of the snaps over their last 2 games that they have lost. This week, the Lions play a home game against the Broncos. They are currently 5-point home favorites against the Broncos on Saturday night. For this reason, the Broncos have been gashed on the ground, allowing the most PPR points to the position and what should be a solid bounce back spot for both Lions running backs, more specifically David Montgomery.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. The only thing I want to bring up is Bijan Robinson. For much shit as we gave Arthur Smith at the beginning of the year, Bijan has finally turned it on a little bit here. Has been RB11 or better in half PPR scoring in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Has also seen rushing totals of 22, 16, 18, and 10. And we saw him get it done as a pass catcher this past week, going 5 for 54 and a score on 7 targets. So good to see Bijan finally getting the type of workload that we thought he should have been getting. Let's go and move on to our RB2s for week 15. Kicking things off there is Raheem Mostert as RB13, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon, James Cook, Zeke, DeAndre Swift, Ty Chandler, Kenneth Walker, and Najee Harris at RB24. Kev, same deal. Who do we need to know about in this RB2 range?
Yeah, first up, I want to talk about Raheem Mostert. I actually have him as an RB1 this week, but Mostert has been one of the biggest steals this year in terms of where he was drafted. He's the RB4 in fantasy points per game. He's gotten there with 16 touchdowns this season on the ground, which is especially impressive that he ranks 30th in opportunity share and 19th in carries. Mostert has run incredibly hot with an obscene 8.5% touchdown rate. He has felt like this year's version of Jamal Williams or LeGarrette Blunt from years past. But next up is a matchup against the Jets. This is an average matchup as the Jets have allowed the 14th most rushing yards and the 7th lowest touchdown rate over the last 4 games. But game script will likely allow Mostert to once again have multiple opportunities to inflate that touchdown number. I also think Devon Achane is also in a good spot. It's really going to depend on game script here because the Jets have really struggled against opposing running backs. through the air. So that is where, Devon Achane can come in. But other than that, Raheem Mostert is in a very good spot once again. Javonte Williams versus Detroit. From weeks 1 through 5, Javonte failed to reach an RB2 or better in any of those weeks. However, since week 7, he has finished inside the top 24 in 5 of those 7 weeks. He's also fourth in explosive run rate, 17th in yards after contact per attempt, and his 14.1 PPR points ranks 15th among all running backs since week 7. He's also been involved in the passing game with a 12.9% target share, which is the 11th highest rate in the league, and he's 17th in yards per route run. Obviously, on the other side of this, we just kind of talked about this game against Detroit. Detroit started the season to dominate the run on defense, but those days appear to be over. This defense has not only been getting wrecked through the air, but now on the ground. They have allowed the 9th most rushing yards per game, the 8th in explosive run rate allowed, 11th in touchdown rate, and 10th in missed tackles forced per attempt. Javonte should be viewed as a high-end RB2 this week. James Cook versus Dallas this week. Since OC Ken Dorsey was fired, we have seen a shift in how James Cook has been used. He's been the RB11 in fantasy points per game, 15.5 fantasy points per game, and has now been featured in the passing game. He has seen target shares of 13%, 15%, and 14% in those 3 games that since Ken Dorsey was fired. For context, he only had 1 game prior to this start where he was above 13% all year. And so it's really given a boost considering he's not somebody who's only playing about 50% of the snaps. He's not a workhorse, but seeing this kind of workload in the passing game has really elevated his efficiency, and it's somebody you've been able to trust in fantasy football. Dallas has been more middle of the road against running backs this year. They've allowed a 4.18 yards per carry average, which ranks 18th in the league, and they are with a 40% stuff rate, which is the 12th lowest rate in the league as well. So pretty good there. So I do think he can get there. This is the game of the week, the highest total on the slate with 50.5 points right now. And as long as James Cook continues to see strong usage in the passing game, he will continue to rack up usable weeks for fantasy owners. And then Kenneth Walker, somebody else I want to hit on against Philadelphia. Walker returned last week with a modest workload. He only played 58% of the snaps and handled 47% of the rush attempts, but he did see a 17% target share, which is the highest rate he's seen all year. Charbonnet actually handled 53% of the rush attempts this week, but was barely used in the passing game with only a 3% target share. Now, typically when we look at Philadelphia, we think of a defense that has been really good against the run. But once again, times have changed. The Eagles have been absolutely gashed on the ground, allowing 156.3 rushing yards per game. They've 5th most rushing touchdowns and the 7th in explosive run rate, 11th in lowest stuff rate, and the 5th highest yards before contact per attempt over their last 6 games. So this is a defense that has definitely been getting gashed with a great matchup on tap. Kenneth Walker does look like a pretty decent RB2 play this week. The reason I don't have him higher is mainly because of Zach Charbonnet being there and also pretty much looking like a split. If that changes, then yes, this could be a great spot here for Kenneth Walker. But that's what worries me with Kenneth Walker. And if we don't get Geno Smith again, we're looking at Drew Lock. So that is obviously also a problem. But the matchup is very good for Kenneth Walker. And then I do want to hit on Zeke Elliott there against Kansas City. I need to hold the L on Zeke. Kind of crushed him last week. Wasn't really all excited about playing him. But while he was terrible on the ground, 22 carries for 68 yards, he did see 7 targets, and he turned that into 7 catches for 76 receptions and a touchdown last week against the Steelers. This week, they will be taking on a Kansas City defense that has allowed the 12th most rushing yards, the 5th most rushing touchdowns, 14th explosive run rate, and the 4th lowest stuff rate as you go along with the 6th most yards after contact per attempt. But he's going to have to get there through the air this week, as I do think he's kind of a strong, middle of the road RB2 this week just because of the passing game usage for him this week. And lastly, I just want to hit on Ty Chandler really quick against Cincinnati. Alexander Madison's status for Week 15 is currently unknown, but it does sound unlikely he's going to be able to play this Saturday. Ty Chandler will figure to be the workhorse back here. Should see probably 60, 70% of the opportunities here. Cincinnati has been a good matchup to target with running backs. They allowed the 6th most rushing yards, the 9th most touchdowns, and the 13th most fantasy points per game to the position. So this is a good spot here for Ty Chandler. I think he is a kind of a back-end RB2 this week against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add there with the RB2s. Ty Chandler was going to be someone who I was going to bring up as well. Should be the clear workhorse role here. The only other running back to see any snaps last week after Alexander Madison went down was Kenny Nwangu, and he saw 3 snaps. So seems like Ty Chandler is going to be the guy here. Let's go ahead and move on to some of the running backs outside of our top 24 for some of the people who might be in some deeper leagues or might be in some need of running back help. So, Kev, anyone outside of the top 24 that you were excited about for week 1 of the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I want to hit on Zamir White. I actually have Zamir White as a low-end RB2, but Another situation that we're gonna have to monitor this week, but they do play on Thursday night. But it seems unlikely that Josh Jacobs will be back from his knee quad injury. That I've seen different people clarify it as different things, but that he suffered on Sunday night. But White would seemingly play the early down role with Amir Abdullah playing the pass catching role. Even better for White is game script that should be in their favor with Justin Herbert being placed on IR. And we also have Keenan Allen is another situation we're gonna have to monitor who missed practice again today with a heel injury. So if he were to miss, I mean, this at this point, this team has nothing to play for. So it really makes no sense to be rushing these guys back out there. And so the Raiders are already 4-point favorites here in this one. So I think that this could be a really positive game script for Zamir White to really have a really solid impact. So, and then CEH McKinnon is another situation. We're not really sure what Pacheco's status is going to be this week. He missed last week, but if he were to miss this week, CH McKinnon will once again handle the backfield. This probably leans more towards a CH game just because of how big of a favorite they are in this one. But however, this is not the best matchup as the Patriots have been decent against the run this year, allowing the 13th fewest PPR points on the season. But the opportunity should be there for CH in a matchup against the Patriots. Chase Brown, I think, is kind of an intriguing RB3 this week. Brown has become more involved in the last two games, handling 27 and 30% of the rush attempts with a 13% target share. There's no denying how explosive Chase Brown looks, and he has earned the right to see more touches. But I do not love this matchup against the Vikings. The Viking defense has been really good this year, and not one that I really want to touch. Jerome Ford is one that a lot of people are going to have probably an RB2. No thanks for me. Again, facing the Chicago elite run defense, and we're already seeing him be in a spot where he's only handling a limited number of touches because he's splitting touches with Kareem Hunt. And now you factor in probably the worst matchup you could possibly face for a running back in Jerome Ford. And so Jerome Ford for me is like barely a borderline RB3 this week. Not really all that excited about him. I do think Jalen Warren and Najee Harris are both really good plays, but they're always harder to trust because they both of them cannibalize each other so much because they handle pretty much the same amount of work. They pretty much split touches down the middle, and so it makes it tougher to trust. But I do think both of them are playable as RB3s this week as well. And then lastly, I do think Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell are both also in play. Gus Edwards is more touchdown or bust, and then Keaton Mitchell is the more explosive that can get there on one run. So I do think both of those guys are decent RB3 plays this week. Lastly, Brian Robinson will be the last one. I don't know if he's going to play this week. There's been talk that he will, but if not, then I think that opens the door for Antonio Gibson to be in a really, really strong spot this week. So those are the guys that I really want to hit on.
Yeah, Gibson was going to be the guy I was going to mention. The only other name that I'll throw out here, which is definitely more of a thin play, but if you're in a deep league, I do think you could look at Rico Dowdle. We saw the Cowboys start to split a little bit more time there with Tony Pollard. We saw Dowdle more involved last week. Now, some of that could have been game script with the Cowboys being up on the Eagles, but the Bills' run defense isn't one that we necessarily have to worry about. They're middle of the road. I believe giving up the 13th most fantasy points per game to running back. So Rico Dowdle is a name you could keep in there. With that being said, that is going to wrap it up. Appreciate all of you for rocking with us. Please hit us with that like and that sub. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. You can also join our Discord, absolutely free, no strings attached. That'll be in the link below. Or you can also join us live on Wednesday night around 10:30 Eastern, where we'll be answering all of your start sit questions as well. So plenty of opportunities. Appreciate you guys. Let's get that dub this week, and we'll talk to you soon.